I'm Sarah Johnson.
I'm Matt Morris, and we have nothing to bring. Welcome to what is hopefully the first proper episode of Nothing to Bring podcast, where we're going to talk to you about anything geeky, nostalgic. But later on, we'll get on to some serious education chat as well. Advent calendar time. I feel like we need a bit of an advent calendar review at this point. Let's start with you then, shall we?
So it arrived, and I'm ever so excited by it. Please witness the experience. You know what? The spelling, I got confused then. Experience the enchanting world of Ghibli with a new surprise every day.
I'm glad that there was a spelling error there.
Yeah, world. Otherwise, what's it about? So I looked at it. It's a decent size. The visuals are obviously beautiful. Really well printed. Incredibly disappointing when you open it. And actually, I've only opened one because it was so rubbish. I just wasn't that interested in opening the others. On the eBay, it's got these 3D images that look really funky, really amazing, like little toys. The reality is much different. So it's the 15th of December. So let me open up the 15th one.
What day did you start on, by the way? Because
I
you didn't give us some time.
I think I got it on the 11th, but I started on day 1, and now I've just opened up day 15. So really, I've just really disregarded all the rules around Advent. So I apologise. So,
Is that kind of cardboard? Is it plastic? What is it?
It's a piece of paper printed, and actually pretty well printed, and put in kind of perspex with a hole in order. And actually, they give you the string as well. So, credit where credit's due. They give you the string to then put it as a bauble. It's pretty naff.
Yeah, and that's what we expected.
I expected it to be naff. It's a shame because actually if they'd made little figurines that you could then, not that I was going to play with them, maybe I would play with them, who knows. It's just a bit naff. It's the fact
that in the advertising, how was it advertised? Was it kind of
like a little figurine? Like a proper little figurine. Did it look like
a Funko Pop type style?
Oh no, tiny. What you might get, say, from Easter egg surprise, sort of like that. So it would have been kind of whatever.
That's really good visual description for what could also be an audio podcast, by the way.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So what I've done is an inane movement with my hand. You can imagine what that inane movement was. It was terrible. It was meant to kind of demonstrate a small little thing that you get from a Kinder Egg surprise. It's pretty naff. So mine is just kind of naff, disappointing.
But that was the whole aim, wasn't it? The whole aim was to be as naff as possible.
Yes, absolutely.
Now I'm going to shift gears because I'm going to go back to what should be the good advent calendar.
Yes.
And I'm going to describe this as the great Star Wars Lego betrayal. Okay. So I'm going to preface this with what you would expect from a Star Wars Lego advent calendar. Okay. So I've got in front of me, I will describe this obviously, but I've got a little box here which has got some old Star Wars Lego advent bits in it. So what you can normally expect, and you'll like something, I'll show you this so you can see it, but what you'll expect is sort of some ships. So that's like a Star Destroyer there, a mini version. Yeah, good. You do sound effects. I'll do visuals.
I'm not going to be.
Then there's an AT-AT walker.
That looks great.
Which again, I think, it looks like although they're mini, it does look like an AT-AT walker.
Yeah, that's not actually going to win any wars, but sure.
No. There's a Gonk droid. Gonk droid's important because there's a Gonk droid in this year's, but that looks like a Gonk droid.
Actually, then you've got a direct contrast with the other Gonk droid.
Not immediately. I can do that in a second. There's kind of like, if you think of a speeder bike in Return of the Jedi, there's like a speeder bike, which actually becomes, if I can get it the right way around, sort of Santa's sleigh.
Yes, I think I remember you sharing that on your previous Facebook.
I probably did. I probably shared it on Instagram or something. So you get all those bits. You get other bits. So look, there's a walker, sort of a walker droid thing, and then there's another spaceship. And these are the sorts of things you can expect. And then you get, look, Star Wars Darth Vader as Santa Claus.
Yeah, a mini thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then you got this chap. He's a stormtrooper, as like a grumpy Santa guy with a red hat on. There's a Santa Darth Maul. You see, so I think you can see already what I'm getting at.
Yeah, those are really cool and
really
Christmas.
Good, sort of high quality. What you can expect, right? Now, there's always some duds, and the duds has actually become a bit of a joke. So you always expect the same droid every single year. We've not got to it yet, but and it's become a bit of an in-joke now. A bit disappointing because I think it's rubbish. There you go. Now I'm just gonna. It starts okay. So you get Babu Freak, who's the character. Now I looked it up, and apparently that is an exclusive. So that's the first time that character has appeared in any Lego set. But given that he's about to appear in the Mandalorian film, he's going to pop up again. So it's not necessarily kind of the absolute.
Won't be exclusive for long.
No, not at all. You do also get a C-3PO. Now, a lot of that bit with Babu Freak and C-3PO is from, I'm going to go a bit as close as I can there to camera because he's got red eyes.
Okay.
So that is the C-3PO from the final film, which is Rise of Skywalker. So that's the red-eyed.
He's not dressed up as Father Christmas or anything, is he?
He's not dressed up as Father Christmas. But here's where it goes wrong. So on day 2, you get a workbench. And then as you sort of move through the days, you get another workbench. And then eventually you get another workbench. And on one of the days, you get a box of droid bits. There's no Lego building at all. It's just a box with 3 bits in it.
Lego is about playing. And if you're not playing with it, then it kind of misses the point.
Yeah. So
right, Lego,
here's the gonk droid.
Here.
Here's the gonk droid from this year. And he's done it as sort of a cleaning droid. Now, that doesn't actually look like a gonk droid anymore. This is being really geeky now. So what actually happens is it's so disappointing. And I think you get both the best and the worst already. So that means from this point on, it can just be mediocre for the next 10 days. Like there's no chance of this improving at all.
But
and you know what? I've actually looked ahead. I'm so disappointed. I've looked ahead and I've broken my own advent calendar rule, and I've looked ahead to see what's to come, and there's nothing better comes. So this is, for me, I say betrayal. I came back to this having stopped doing it for a couple of years because I thought it was getting a bit poor. And now I think this is the last time I'll ever do it.
This has just consolidated it for you.
It has. It's actually, it's done the thing that I kind of, knew would happen eventually. Probably the best thing so far is today. Sorry about the noise. The best thing today is I've not even built them. This is how disappointed I am. I haven't even built them. We've built day 1 and 2, and that is it. It's a Jawa with a green Christmas jumper. Okay. That's as good as it gets.
Yeah, and that is good.
That is good.
Happy with that. Yeah, Christmas up.
But beyond that, that's it, unfortunately. I don't even feel like opening the rest of it, to be honest. And what's interesting is, obviously, my children, they're not even that interested in it this year, and they're prime age for this.
Yeah,
and it shows you how disappointing it is. 7 and 10.
7 and 10. Apologies.
So this shows you how disappointing it is. Then they're not even inspired by it. So there you go. That was what started off as, what could have been a really good advent calendar has turned into something quite disappointing, actually. I haven't even bothered with the Friends advent calendar because that was just.
As always, yeah. I mean, same with Studio Ghibli.
Where do you want to pick? Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with some comments first?
40 seconds in, and I love it about our podcast. I thought that was quite nice.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's good.
Someone's response to my favourite cartoon, Once Upon a Time. What the actual swear word? I share your co-host confusion, disappointment, and ultimate sadness over your response here. There are so many correct answers, and you picked literally none of them. For shame. That was in regard to In Our Time.
Get this, though. I get this. So I picked 3. And the reason I picked 3...
basically cheated. So people felt... And actually, somebody said, Mysterious Cities of Gold, total classic, go Matt.
Exactly. Mysterious Cities of Gold is a classic, and we talked about it. We talked about how there's just nothing like that anymore. It's so deep, and it's so intricate and well-designed, and it looks great, and it sounds great, and it's of a time when children's TV was just made differently. And there's other things a bit like that. But here's the thing. I picked 3, and I stand by the 3 I picked because of the theme tunes. Theme tunes in these cartoons were really important to me, even now. But this is why I think. Do you think it's a boy thing? And I don't want to bring gender to it, but do you think it's a boy thing?
About what? No, because I'm definitely female, and I like 80s cartoon as well. And actually, I did a session for Bromcom, who haven't sponsored this podcast, by the way, for shame, as my friend would say. I did some work for I did a session for Bromcom about AI, and I started off with a scene from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, which was about when the machine started kind of, what's the word? Not a coup d'etat, that's not a word, that's several words, revolted against the humans. So the toaster started going mad. And I spoke about the idea And one of the phrases, I think, from Shredder is, "The machines are alive." There's lots of voices in this podcast already. I'm a girl. I still enjoyed cartoons. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Gummy Bears. Would you even mention Gummy Bears? Gummy Bears is amazing. There's loads of really good cartoons, and I'm definitely female, and I definitely enjoyed them.
So, and that comment made me think just how many I could have gone to as the ones I watched. I was thinking, right, so Dungeons and Dragons. I know Dungeons and Dragons as a cartoon isn't Dungeons and Dragons as it is in terms of the board game. And, you play Dungeons and Dragons, at the tabletop game, rather. It's not the same thing, but actually Dungeons and Dragons as a cartoon has a really significant following, and doesn't have an ending. What people don't know about Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of people don't know, is they never made the final episode. Everybody thinks the final episode, where they choose not to kill the villain and to save the villain's life, is the final episode. It's not. It's not even the last episode in that sequence of episodes. There is a final episode, which is called Requiem. Say that with your teeth in. Which was never filmed. But there is a fan-made version of it on YouTube, because you can get the script.
I'm just going to recommend to anyone listening to this, never, ever, ever read fan stories about things, because it takes you down a hole that is
I agree.
Generally quite bizarre.
But this isn't a fan-made episode.
Okay, so they've already made it, and then people talk about it. Fine.
No, it's the proper script that was never made, and then somebody has made a proper version of that script, and not an official version, but it's that good that it feels like it's a real episode. And if you've seen the script, you'll know that it does follow the sort of the script that was written.
I feel, Mr. Morris, as you are a teacher by trade, that you're setting me homework.
I've got lots of homework for you.
Don't make me do homework.
I've got another one, because I thought about other cartoons that I was going to say, did you watch, that I think you might say no to. Because when I was thinking about songs in cartoons, the two other songs that really stand out for me, one of them isn't actually the TV series of the cartoon. It's the lion version of Transformers from Transformers the movie.
Okay.
So that's the theme to the film, not necessarily to but the other one isn't an intro theme tune. It's an outro. It's the closing credits to the Raccoons.
Did Love the Raccoons. Of course I watched the Raccoons. It was fabulous. I loved it.
So who's your favourite character in the Raccoons?
Oh, how do I remember that? That was like 30 years ago.
Cyril Snare?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember Cyril Snare?
Yeah. Didn't he have like a longer nose?
He had the kind of funny shaped nose, yeah.
I love raccoons as well. So I watched loads of YouTube videos about raccoons where they just basically invade cats feeding, and they wet all the food, and they wet candy floss and it disappears, and to see a raccoon's disappointment, that makes me sound really cruel. That I love.
You're talking about real raccoons now, aren't you?
I am now. I've gone straight onto real raccoons. I love raccoons, but the cartoon's great.
Do you know what the closing credit song is?
No.
It's called "Run With Us" by Lisa Lougheed.
I know "Run With Us." Yes, I do know that. Yeah. Okay.
So it's a good one, because it's an actual song.
Yes.
As opposed to a song written for someone will say, oh yeah, it was written for. I don't know, but it's rather than it being.
It goes back to that whole concept that we've got nothing to bring, and lots of people know a lot more about everything else. So don't worry about it.
There's loads of things there I've just said that no doubt could be corrected. But as far as I'm concerned, in my head, it's right. So I'm going to say it.
If you want to correct us, then put it on the YouTube comments, say that Matt's a rubbish co-host and knows nothing, and we'll go, yeah, that's probably the case. Thank you for letting me know.
Please do. This is the least researched podcast you'll ever listen to.
No, I've done research. I've got several pages of research.
Okay. So from my perspective, this will be the least researched podcast.
Well, yeah. I don't know. Peak COVID for me was watching Korean kind of food vans making lots of food and putting a lot of sliced cabbage in it. That's what I did a lot.
Where were you watching this?
Well, it was COVID. I was watching it at home.
So on YouTube, you mean?
On YouTube, yeah.
Is this some sort of kink? What is this? What gets you into this?
I mean, cabbage is not my kink. I think could be my catchphrase, I think. I was just, peak
Title
COVID.
of the episode.
Cabbage is not my kink. Brilliant, actually. I've gone red now, probably. Hopefully.
So you were watching food things on
I was
YouTube,
watching food. Yeah,
that hole you went down.
So food, yeah, and I would just watch video after videos of Korean kind of food trucks, food vans in Korea making various different food stuff, and they would put several different sauces on it. They would always have shredded cabbage and so on, and it'd be various different types of meat. And I would watch hours of it, and that is what COVID did to me. Although I didn't mind being at home during COVID, I don't mind being at home. But obviously, I'm in a very privileged position, though I do appreciate that not everyone had those experiences. I also didn't have all my most recent children. I think if I had all my recent children and COVID was happening, I would have probably found it very, very different.
I think it depends on your circumstances at the time, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I had my oldest, who was 10 at the time, transitioning into secondary school, which had its own issues. But we went for our designated walk once a day. My ex-husband came to live with us so we could co-parent effectively. I mean, for most people, that would have been really challenging, but actually we did okay considering.
Yeah, we did right because two boys who were of a certain age, and it was a hot summer, so they just kind of bonded together because
nice.
we've got a bit of space in the garden. So therefore, we spent most of our time at the back of the house in the garden, just playing with water hoses and things.
That's it. And it was such nice weather.
Great bonding. Yeah,
such nice weather as well.
Although it was great to finally get back to some normality. And interestingly, it did a great thing for us, which is we got to meet some of our neighbours. Because on those times when you could go out for a walk and we would just walk around here, you'd see someone in the window or you'd see someone just sat out front of their house. And we got to meet people we would never normally have met just on the road next to us and parallel to us. So that was a really great thing that I don't like talking about. Coming out of COVID, and particularly in education, one of the kind of go-to phrases or the stock phrases that kept coming back was, so what good has come out of it? Well, no good came out of it. Let's get that.
Yeah, it was just incidental.
Yeah. Some things happened which you may have carried on doing, and they may turned into positive things. But let's not talk about what good came out of COVID, because let's remember what it was about.
I think the reality is I didn't see my uncle because he died during COVID. I was only able to see his body after he died. And my grandmother, because I stuck to the rules, I didn't see her and she died on her own. So there's bits, I mean, I didn't mind COVID, but I also suffered, but not suffered as much as some potentially as well. So on that note of people's different experiences of the same event, I do my homework, and it would be difficult for me to not acknowledge or kind of recognise the recent local child safeguarding practice review of Mossbourne Victoria Park Academy. So just for those that aren't sure about it, I'm just going to kind of briefly talk about it to keep you au fait. So between February and November 2024, there were a number of concerns expressed regarding children's experiences at Mossbourne Victoria Park Academy. And that kind of then escalated into national media interest. A website was created called Educating Hackney, and that was looking at drawing the links between behavioural policies and the potential consequences of those behavioural policies on children's mental health. And from there on, the local child safeguarding practice review has just been published last week, and they were looking at the balance of probabilities of incidences or particular themes around the behavioural policies being enacted and likely to have been occurred. I think there's several bits of interest here. Firstly, there was an 8-month delay to the publication due to kind of lack of supporting the investigation in different ways. Sorry, I just punched the mic. And the report goes on to talk about how on the balance of probability, there was quite a lot of shouting, seemed to be to intimidate children, what they call desking, which was sending children out of a class and making them sit at a desk in the corridors. That's not a term I've heard before, actually. No, I've not heard of desking before either. It's quite interesting when we talk about how nouns become verbs and the rigid application of behavioural policies affecting children with SEND in particular, and the Alternative Provision Centre, I know you'll be particularly interested in this, Matt, being used as containment and lacking specialist staff, so really being used as a dumping ground, and prioritising strictness above all else. And I'm just going to read one quote which really struck with me, and I wrote about it in my Substack as well, and people thereon have spoken about it. The paradox of outstanding results alongside deep distress can be explained by a culture that prioritises compliance and control above all else. Found that really upsetting, actually. Really upsetting. So
what were the recommendations of that report? It took a while to come out.
The recommendations were pertaining to governance, accountability, recording of sanctions, and so on. And I think the dialogue then kind of spilled out, as it does on X, around people kind of thinking about it in different ways. And actually, I've asked permission, and I'm going to be annoying and go on to X now to have a look at it. My friend Clive Hill, he talks about, he's done a tweet where he's been ill for a few weeks. So he talks about deliberately stayed off X. I've reminded just how partisan education is and how we let the sector down by acting like we know all and have nothing to learn. Leaders across education screenshotting posts, snide comments, who cares more attitudes, and a complete disregard for the leaders, teachers, kids and wider community of yet another school in the headlines is beyond disappointing to see. Every school is built on people, a community, people who work, he used the word bloody and bloody hard, giving up time with their own loved ones to do the right thing by kids that aren't theirs. Good leadership views things through different lenses. Leading people is about more than measurable data points. Teacher recruitment and retention will always be marred by our public image. Who would want to leave behaviour and attitudes in school when trial by Twitter is out there? And talks about 2020 hindsight. Not everything needs conflict. And I think that's the thing, is the Safeguarding Practice Review is really upsetting to read. And one part that really upset me, actually, when I was rereading it today, was about a child that was discharged from a mental health inpatient psychiatric unit. And actually, I've worked with a child from that school when I was the teacher in charge of a psychiatric inpatient service, and they did everything to support that child. I cannot tell you how supportive that same school was. And then to hear, 20 years down the line, actually their response to that child was, stop crime. That, to me, was so upsetting. And there's lots of conversations as well. I know I'm talking a lot, Matt. I will let you talk because I'll get complaints from people.
Not here for me.
Well, not here for me.
Well, they're here for someone.
They're here for someone. They're here for the Transformers.
They're here for the Transformers and the retro geekiness.
Yeah, I think a culture of a school can change dramatically. And one of the kind of criticisms of the Safeguarding Review was lots and lots of people found the school really, really supportive, amazing in lots of different ways. And they haven't had any complaints and had lots and lots of compliments. And I suppose because I work with those children that are marginalised or on the edges, I'm always interested in how systems and approaches can potentially further marginalise those children, further disenfranchise them. What we should be doing with those children is bringing them further in, and that we can't discount those experiences of those 1, 2, 3, 4 children. Now, that's not to say that schools shouldn't have discipline. We do need to be really careful and mindful about how our behavioural policies could be negatively affecting children's mental health. I think that's what upset me the most, because I thought so much has changed 20 years is a long time. But actually, sometimes it's just one head teacher that can make an inordinate difference. And it was interesting that Clive linked it to recruitment and retention as well, and about how a lot of staff felt deeply uncomfortable about, there was things about shouting in children's faces and so on. And I've spoken about it before, Matt. I speak about it more regularly, but school was my safe place, and how do we make sure that school is a safe place for all children, not just the ones that, are middle of the road, but the quiet ones, the noisy ones, the challenging ones.
Yeah. What surprises me is that, we talk about our own backgrounds. You talk about it being a safe place for you. School was absolutely a safe place for me. As much as there were some challenges there, I loved school. I hated PE, mainly because I hated coming in damp from PE and then going straight into French. That was why I hated PE, not because I disliked PE at all. But anyway.
And the rush to get changed.
Yeah. And, enforced showers as well. A lot of us would rather we're adolescents.
I'd rather stink.
Exactly. We were adolescents. We'd have rather stunk the place out. That's our default at that age. But it was a safe place for me. I really enjoyed it. And there was so many experiences I look back on now that were great. And I've said this all along. And I actually opened an event with all of our staff earlier this year, where I said part of the reason I'm here is twofold. Number one, because I genuinely wanted to make a difference in terms of young people, because I enjoyed school so much that I really want young people to have that same safe, happy, rewarding experience that I had. The second reason why I said that I wanted to get into education was because I wanted to be an author, and I thought that being a teacher would be a really easy way, because I'd get lots of time back in order to write books. You learn very quickly that that's not the case. But the real reason was about happiness and enjoyment. And I actually shared a photo of me at school in a school production which was there to kind of break the ice and make people laugh. But at the same time, genuinely, I enjoyed that. What surprises me is that we've got so many and I'm talking generically, and I'm talking about my own experiences, but I know this is true elsewhere. I meet so many people, and I've experienced so many people at this stage in my career, some 24 years into it, who are not there because they're interested in expressing those same desires, creating a happy, safe place for young people. They are there to earn a quick buck. We hear this kind of narrative about how it can be more financially, or it can be financially beneficial to go and get a job working in a supermarket than being in a school in a supportive capacity. But actually, people are choosing to be in school in supportive capacities, and then they're not really committing to that role. I want people in schools who are really committed to doing the best for young people. I'm just surprised at how many people just are kind of so jaded by education from within the system. Now, that to me is inherent in the system. The system's got its own problems, which perhaps means that people just can't fully engage with the profession anymore. And that's also a worry. But it does concern me that there are so many people in the profession who aren't there for the right reasons still. And, we're in a recruitment and retention problem, aren't we, nationally? There are issues around recruitment and retention, possibly more so retention than recruitment, I think is the more concise narrative at the moment. But I'm seeing both sides of that. And unless we do something about getting the right people, keeping the right people, and then undoing some of these issues around recruitment and retention, we're never going to have a fully safe, happy system. You talked about alternative provision a little bit there. We both have a background in alternative provision, and you know that one of my hobby horses is what has unfortunately been deemed as internal AP. Now, I'd prefer to use other terms for that, but let's talk about that in terms of what it could be. It could be a range of provisions. Some of it might be referred to as kind of inclusion centres or resource centres, or internal exclusions can often be used in this same remit, or exclusion rooms. So you have both the negative language and the positive language, and they can vary in quality as well. And we know that there are some fantastic resources there, and we know there are some really poor
It's
resources.
amazing. Absolutely.
Absolutely. I've seen some incredible, and we need to champion those more, I think, in terms of what is possible and what is great. And some have learned from the alternative provision sector. And likewise, some people in the alternative provision sector have learned from the mainstream sector in terms of how they do inclusion. But unfortunately, you get too many of what you've just described in that example, which is the dumping ground, the place to put children.
If those issues around desking, for example, which is send the child out into a corridor and there's no kind of intervention thereafter, is actually about resourcing. And it might not be that the intention is as a kind of exclusionary activity, but if you have members of staff off sick, if you have difficulty recruitment and retention, if you don't have people on the ground supporting, and teachers want to teach because that's presumably why they're there, and children are being disruptive or whatever might be happening, then how are you then actually resourcing the next stages to make sure that those children are having a cycle back? Because just sending a child to a desk to sit in silence or whatever it might be is unlikely to be helpful.
Quick, easy fix, especially when you've got resourcing issues. It's a quick, easy fix, or is it perceived as a quick, easy fix? Let's just put that child there for a minute while we sort this out. And you find far too much of that in schools.
And I understand that as well.
Too many challenging needs all at once for schools to be able to deal with all of them effectively at the same time.
And maybe not having enough information, but there's also a bit about those draconian rules as well that I think has become more frequently applied in schools than what I remember. And I think that's quite interesting. Today I met with Helena Wahlberg from Stockholm, and lots of schools in Sweden are moving towards what they call zero tolerance, and have visited the Michaela School as well and using that approach. And we know that charter schools in America have actually said this is unfairly focused on Black children and to their detriment as well. So there's bits there about that zero tolerance. And I'm meeting with Rick Kelly on Thursday in Canada because they have banned that approach within their schools, which is quite interesting. I'm really looking forward to that conversation. But it reminds me of a scene in Star Trek. Got nothing to bring, so let's talk about Star Trek. And it's an episode where Worf doesn't analyse security properly on a planet as per standard. Wolf, you're ridiculous. This is your one job. And he says, no, Jean-Luc Picard, the rules are really normal. And so what they do is they send a child onto a planet that they've never visited before. Their risk assessments are pretty shocking. And Wesley Crusher trips, or he goes to catch a ball and he steps on some grass and it says, keep off the grass. And the response to that from the planet is that he's going to be executed. And Jean-Luc Picard considers the Prime Directive, which is to not get involved. And then he goes, actually stuff the Prime Directive. This is clearly ridiculous. Rescues Wesley Crusher. I love using that within sociology teaching. This idea that actually breaking of rules should be proportionate and fair, and actually minor infractions shouldn't be punished in those sorts of ways. And some of that comes from the broken window theory based in America. This idea that if you have a broken window it shows that those kind of informal social controls are not there and leads to more crime and more kind of infractions of norms and mores of a society. And actually, the criticism of that is that if you have those kind of strict rules and you are really stamping upon that, what you do is you move the crimes to just another area. And it makes me think of those kind of zero tolerance schools. If you have those strict rules that people can't really adhere to because no human can really do that, then they vote with their feet and they go elsewhere. And that's always my worry, is that which children aren't being served by these schools in the community and where are they going? I think rules need to be there, but how are we mindful about how we are sanctioning behaviour that we don't want to see? And I think it's worth talking about Tom Bennett. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying this as well. Tom Bennett was really kind, and I wanted to find out more about what he was saying around behaviour. And he talks about, and I'm just going to go back to my notes again to make sure I'm right, so in the report that I mentioned about Mossbourne, talks about the rigid application of behavioural policies and not considering SEND. Tom Bennett is really clear when you see him talk, and he gives the example of if you have Tourette's, and I have Tourette's, for example, so I noted it, then you're not going to say, if a child shouts out, that you're going to sanction them. They clearly can't help it. It sounds like this school hadn't really thought about that. And perhaps those are some of the kind of bits around SEND, and that's a really easy one. So I think I say it sometimes, don't I, Matt? I think I say it sometimes to you, like, you know, if you're doing a presentation, don't be SHIT and don't be a dick. Like, these aren't difficult things, are they, really?
No.
Really consider what's going on around you.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for things like trauma-informed practice and ACEs. And I think that those are the basics now of education.
So just for people listening, adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah. So I think those are the basics of education. I think you need to have, as teachers, in your toolkit, an understanding of the background and the needs of the children. Where, you know, when the sort of the teacher standards came along, one of the things that was really clearly part of that was that a teacher needs to understand the needs of the child and plan accordingly for the needs. But for me, the thing that was missing in that was the background of the child, the context of the child, the life that that child has, both in school and out of school, and what those experiences are. Is there trauma in that child's life? For example, and we know this from, you know, we've worked in successful alternative provisions where the first thing that you did was you made sure every child that walked through the door was in a fit state and if they weren't,
Absolutely.
you took that child to one side and you had mentors in place who would work with them and say, look, let's have a sit down, let's have a cup of tea, let's have a piece of toast, let's talk through. And more often than not, it was the child and the parent had an argument that morning. So the child wasn't in a mentally fit state to go straight into the classroom. So we've experienced that from types of provision where it was the day-to-day, it was how you did things. And I feel like it needs to be the bread and butter of what we do in schools. And it's great that some schools are moving more and more towards the practice of, let's understand you this morning, today, in context, before we even try to put you into an environment where there's an element of compliance, regardless of how grand that compliance is, whether it's zero tolerance or whether it's just, look, there is an expectation around learning. But before we even move into that kind of spectrum of compliance, where are we today? Can we move from A into B, into the classroom and get started?
I think it's really important as well to make sure that when we're thinking about adverse childhood experiences, that we aren't seeing them as limiting factors for a child's academia, behaviour and things like that. So if I add up my adverse childhood experiences, yeah, through the roof, not a problem. Tick, tick. Where I became sure in myself was in school and being educated. And my teachers had really high aspirations for me. Most of them. I mean, some didn't, let me be clear. But the majority did. And I did very well at school from my perspective. I mean, I know lots of other people may have got A stars and everything else, but from my perspective, I did really well. Went on to university and so on. And I do think we have to make sure that we don't limit children. And we have to be really, really clear as well that you may have had XYZ happen to you or things really challenging, but we also have minimum standards of keeping people safe. And I think you can hold those two things together. And I think one of the issues I find with some of the education discourse is that it's, trauma-informed practice means that children can do whatever they want. No, that's not the case. It's being mindful that we don't want to create environments which are in themselves with their systems and processes traumatic or difficult or challenging for a child. But it doesn't mean that we don't, behave in ways that are appropriate.
If anything.
Yeah. And also,
it's the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the opposite. It's being able to understand how you are then putting them in the best frame or you all being in the best environment to then challenge them, to have aspirations for them. It unlocks the door rather than creates the barrier.
Schooling environment should be modelling behaviour that we want children to see. And if staff are shouting in children's faces, that's not behaviour that we would expect of adults to do to one another either. And we need to be really careful about how we model adult relationships and adult-child relationships as well. And it should be appropriate. And that's not to ignore poor behaviour. It's absolutely to signpost what we expect and to model what we expect. But also what we do needs to be fair and proportionate and justified. And I think it also goes to this idea of what would I like my child's experience to be at school? And if you don't have children, doesn't mean you can't imagine how you'd want it for yourself. And you wouldn't expect to go to work and be shouted at in your face. That's not okay. And it shouldn't even need to be said.
I absolutely think some of the best provisions I've seen are where the rules are the same for the children and the adults. And beyond the kind of some of the theory that's out there, we all know Paul Dick's fantastic, and when the adults change and that kind of theory around it. But actually, when you go into a provision and that relational practice is the same between staff in the same way it is between pupils and between pupils and staff, so everybody is treated in exactly the same way, that's some of the best provision out, because it's just natural then to everybody. You walk through that door and that is how we behave, that is how we model, that is what is expected of everybody.
Just to let you know, I play Paul Dick's bingo with Paul, and I send him a message every time his name's mentioned, so I will be sending him a message saying Paul Dick's bingo.
Super.
In a moment's time. I don't play Tom Bennett bingo, but his name also features quite significantly. I don't think either of them play Sarah Johnson bingo. Maybe they should. I don't think my name is mentioned that much. Yeah, they should. Play Sarah Johnson bingo. I don't know what that entails. Just if you hear my name, cross off a sheet. But I think, yeah. So I think it's just another, actually what a safeguarding review shouldn't be doing is, we're right and you're wrong. I think it should be a moment for us to look at ourselves as a profession and consider what we're doing. If you're a doctor, you have the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. I'm sure I've bastardized that somewhat. I think that should be about school, do no harm. And that's not to say that behaviour and rules shouldn't exist. And I know things are really tough right now in schools as well. It really is hard and it's really difficult. But I think we need to take a moment to reflect on our practice. And that's not to say that I've never shouted. If you probably saw me earlier on with 3 kids shouting at me, it was really difficult to not shout, and I probably did. But hopefully I'll reflect on that and make different choices tomorrow. But it can be hard. It can be really hard.
You talked about reviews. You have become a profession that far too often weighs the pig, that far too often leans towards review as opposed to recognition, reflection and recommendation and support. What's the point of a review if it doesn't then lead into or directly lead into some form of change?
I think absolutely. Education should always be adapting and amending and changing what they do and thinking about what they do. And because what might work in one setting or one particular kind of context might not be effective in another. And Dave Whittaker was interviewed by Graham Chatterley last week and talking about how the Michaela School, for example, has a particular cohort of children, and it might work in their community. But actually, if you put it in the community of up north, for example, white working class demographic, is that going to work in the same way? Possibly, probably not. So it's about reflection, but also about a real understanding of your particular context of where you are. And David Didow and Martin Robinson in their podcast, I think a few weeks ago, was looking at the best schools, and most of them are in London for lots of different reasons. And I think it was David talking about policies, and you can't pick and choose because they all interact with each other in certain ways. And if you take one element, is that going to impact on another? And if you don't like all of those policies and you're picking and choosing, maybe it's not quite right for your school community. I don't think David will listen to this, so I can say what I want anyway, but I'm sure I've not quite articulated that as well as what David did. But it is sort of, if you take away some elements of the foundations, then is the building going to collapse because it doesn't quite work in the way that you want it to?
I think you've certainly proven there that you don't have nothing to bring.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I think you're quite passionate about the subject, which is good. And we all should be. We should all be passionate about safeguarding. We should all be passionate about safe environments.
Yeah. It's just bread and butter of what we should be doing is creating a
Absolutely.
safe, nurturing, supportive educational environment for our children as a standard.
But I think that's really important. You said nurturing. How many schools are truly nurturing? How many schools are exams factories? Let's be truthful. We still have an education system which is based on putting children in almost factory-like through a process to prepare them for the factory. That's why we have school uniforms. Not to get into the school uniform debate, and I will upset everybody if I start talking about school uniforms, but the reality of school uniforms is to prepare people to work in the factory in a uniform.
So that links to the idea of Bowles and Gintis correspondence principle. So any sociology A-level students listening, look that up.
So on Nothing to Bring podcast, we're going to take you through the serious side of education. We're also going to look at the silly side of our lives and apply that to education, much as Sarah did there by bringing Star Trek: The Next Generation into her storytelling around schools, which was beautifully segued in there, I have to admit. Anyway, so that's us for this episode. I'm Matt Morris.
I'm Sarah Johnson.
And we have nothing to bring.